Hi, so I'm here with Sophie to talk about the mistakes that people make when they're podcasting. By now, people have probably realised that audio is a really, really valuable format to put out their content on, but it is very, very easy to slip up. So let's talk about the 10 most common mistakes that people make. One of the first things that people need to think about when they make a show is who is behind the mic, because they need to connect with the audience and they need to be engaging and entertaining and also really know their stuff. Can you talk to me a little bit about why people need to really think about and take the time to choose who is going to represent their show and be the voice of their show?
100%. I think the most important thing about having a podcast is that your audience are listening, right? And if your host is boring or not switched on, or your audience aren't engaging with them, then that's a big problem, right? Because they've kind of checked out before they've even started listening. So it's really important, I think, when you pick the host, that it's someone that your audience will respond to. And particularly if you're picking more than one host, that those two hosts bounce off each other and also
a good rapport.
Really complement each other.
That actually, I think, spills over into guests as well, because you can have a really great host, but if your guest is, awkward behind the mic and things like that, it can really lead to awkward content.
Definitely.
And I think that's why things like pre-interviews and calling your guest beforehand to make sure they're comfortable and things like that are really important, because you can also get a good impression on the phone of whether they are good and they flow well and what they're saying will come across really well on a podcast. But that kind of awkwardness on a show can also translate when they overscript and they sound really stilted. Can you talk about that kind of mistake and why it happens?
Yeah, I think overscripting is a really big thing. I think when people aren't very confident as well, their natural instinct is to want to script, so it gives them something to follow. But actually, when you were reading a script, it's a lot harder. But researching and knowing the topic and knowing your subject is usually the best thing. That way you don't have to read word for word, and it can come across very natural and very enthusiastic, and that's kind of what you want.
Like, right?
Yeah.
So if overscripting is a problem, do you find that underscripting can be an issue as well?
I think you still always have to refer back to the purpose of the podcast and why you're doing what you're doing. And I think underscripting is only a problem if you haven't researched and you don't know your topic and you don't know what you're talking about on the episode that you're doing.
Yeah, I think you also have to remember when you're behind the mic and you're talking to your guest, or even if it's a solo podcast, that people aren't going to listen for 2 hours unless you've got something to say and they can follow what you're trying to say, right? So if you underscript and you waffle for 2 hours, that's as unattractive for me personally as a podcast that is super overscripted and feels very robotic in how it's read.
Yeah, you can definitely kind of lose your trail of thought and you lose the listener in that process.
As a producer, I spend so much time scripting and researching and structuring a podcast, and that's not just a series, that's down to the episode as well. Can you talk to me about why it is so important for podcasters to have a content plan before they start?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, a content plan just makes life easier, right? You're not focusing putting all your eggs in one basket for the first episode. You know your message and you know exactly what you are doing ahead of time. It allows you to refer back to your original objectives, which are really important. So why are you doing the podcast? Who's it for? What's the audience? It also allows you to do a lot of what is the initial grunt work of podcasts, which is guest appearances, booking guests, making sure that research is done, etc. So it's super, super important that as soon as you understand what you want to make the podcast, who you want to make the podcast for, and why you want to make it, its message, that you start planning that content as early as possible.
Yeah, and I also feel like then you're just not making content aimlessly, right? Because you've got an overall structure of what your show should look like. You know who you need to reach out to. You can book guests in advance. You're not running, you're not down to the wire in terms of timing, because I've recorded in advance. I know what I'm saying. I know where the podcast is headed. And that overall purpose and message is threaded through everything that you make for the show.
Yeah, definitely. We call it the helicopter view is one way of saying it. So you have an overview of everything that you know is coming up over your series, and that is super useful, that if ever you get a bit lost or things drop out of place, you can nip back in and pick stuff up.
So we've got great content, we've chosen a great host, we've lined up our guests. The next hurdle, I guess, is equipment. This is like a major thing for me. I love tech as it is, but but now with with the growth of podcasting and all the great equipment that's come out, it can be a little bit daunting for new podcasters knowing what they need and what they don't need. So is there a really common mistake that you see with regards to people making podcasts and their equipment that they've chosen to use?
Yeah, first one always is not using a microphone and headphones.
No.
Like number one, like, you know, the gospel of podcasting is microphone and headphones. A really good quality mic just allows you to make really good quality audio. They always say that, you know, you can tidy stuff up in post as much as you want, but if the audio at the beginning isn't really good quality, you're going to be struggling from the start, right? Headphones. I know people seem to think that they can hear everything outside without headphones on, but it doesn't work like that. When you have headphones on, it allows you to focus on the audio that you are making, and that's super duper important, and also stops feedback. Somebody's making a cup of tea behind you in the office, that will just get picked up. So it's really important. Microphone, headphones.
I see so many people buy a really great microphone and then they're talking into it from the side, or they're using it incorrectly, it's facing upwards, and it means that a really expensive great mic just sounds terrible. So equipment is really important, but also knowing how to use it is important. And then following on from everything that you've recorded, the next hurdle is a really big one, but actually a really common mistake to make is with regard to editing. Can you talk to me a little bit about poor editing and why it happens?
Recording a podcast conversation is the easy bit, right? But I think people forget that editing is truly where a lot of the skill set lies. A really good editor is worth their weight in gold. They'll be able to trim out noises that you don't need to hear. They'll be able to structure and re-edit conversations so they sound shorter and snappier. They'll be able to add certain sounds and certain effects to your podcast so it just ups it that level so it truly sounds professional and amazing.
I edit a podcast that's about money and they do it remotely, and people would be surprised, I think, to hear how many mic bumps or dog barks or babies crying or coughs that you have to edit out of a podcast, because it takes the audience out of what they're listening to and can be really distracting and detracts from the content. So yeah, I completely agree with you. An editor is worth their weight in gold.
100%.
Something that I constantly have to remind people as a producer is to choose their recording location really carefully, because if you can hear the sound of drilling, or you can hear, you know, you've got an open window and there's cars zooming by, all of that is stuff that you can't really edit out in post, because you might hear a car zooming by whilst you're speaking. There's nothing I can do to cut that out. So choosing your recording location, whether that's you thinking about echoes or, like I said, that background noise, all of that is really vital to making sure that the initial audio is as high quality as possible. So then it makes the work for the producer, for the editor, as easy as possible, and makes the quality of your podcast as high as possible.
Definitely. It's all about the foundation of the audio, isn't it? Like, you need to have those initial building blocks to make incredible audio.
Exactly.
So a quiet room is a great way to start.
And that's what gets an audience coming back to listen to your show, because they know that they've got great content and all the other things are lined up, but also it's really easy to listen to in terms of the audio. Another thing that keeps your audience coming back is a consistent publishing schedule. Now, I think this is why there are so many inactive podcasts on the internet, because people don't realize how much work it is to record a podcast, edit it, do all of that research and all of the stuff that comes beforehand, and get it out on time. So if you say you're going to get it out every Wednesday at 9 a.m, it has to be out every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Can you talk to me about, you know, in your experience, why having that consistent publishing schedule is so important?
Definitely. Consistency is key. When you're trying to build an audience and grow and bring people to your podcast, you need to let them know when and where they can find it on a regular basis. Yeah. I always say to people, podcast episodes are no different from TV episodes, right? If I was releasing a TV show and just randomly popped episodes out when I felt like it, would be very difficult for an audience to follow my series, wouldn't it, if they know it's not coming out Monday at 9 o'clock. So I think, consistency is a key. It's also really good because it means that people can shape their schedules around what content you're releasing. So if they know that your podcast always comes out at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, they might be like, well, that's when I'm going to go for my run, because I know that's when that podcast drops.
Yes.
So it's great.
And I think that's really important in podcasting now, right? The duration, when it comes out, all of those things, when you know it's coming out, you're going to be there, you're going to be ready, people will be able to talk about it with each other, and then there's that online aspect of it and the community aspect of it, of people waiting. I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, and there is nothing more frustrating for me when I think I know when a podcast episode's coming out, and I get ready and I start doing the washing up, whatever, go for my run, and then it's not there. I can't tell you how annoying that is. And so it's devastating, is probably not the right word, but yeah, so consistency is definitely the key. You want people to be excited and look forward to when your podcast comes out, and part of that is them knowing when they can get the content that they want.
Exactly. And this last mistake that people make, I actually think is probably one of the biggest in terms of consequences. You might know what I'm talking about. There's this myth that goes around kind of podcasters, which is if you only use like 10 to 30 seconds of the audio, then you're in the clear. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, copyright audio. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Unfortunately, podcasting does not have, like a lot of other industries like music and TV, kind of what is known as a very easy way to clear music that is written by other people or sung by other people. Therefore, you really can't use it unless you get permission from the people that have written that music, performing that music. And again, that can be a very long, arduous process to track all those people
and
down.
And expensive.
Very
as well.
expensive, yes, that's a good point. So normally we recommend to stay away from music or have something composed originally for you. Or there are a lot of amazing music royalty-free websites that you can use as well, where you can download and pay for a track, and then that's yours to use.
Yeah, but the bottom line is you cannot. That myth is not true.
No, sorry, no 10 seconds of Adele, no random 30 seconds of Arctic Monkeys. It's not happening. Like, sorry.
And people will shut down your podcast. You know, the legal aspect of that is really massive and consequential. So it's important that you bear that in mind. But the music side of things, because it does help a podcast along, like you said, there are loads of different avenues that you can go down to find music that suits your show that won't get you in trouble.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for walking me through the top podcasting mistakes to avoid. That was really helpful.
No problem, Meera.